Hi everyone, it's Lauren and welcome to part one of my March book reviews. I'm going to try something a little bit different this month and split my monthly wrap-ups into two parts. I have one 2 weeks into the month and another one at the end of the month. Just because I was finding in my monthly wrap-ups I'm just talking about each book so much more and I have so much more to say, and maybe I'm reading a little bit more than I used to, and I feel like I'm being constrained by video length. Like, I don't think anyone wants to watch a 25-minute video of me talking about all these books. So I thought to give each book their due and talk about them in as much detail as I want to, it would be better to split the video into two and have one halfway through the month and another one at the end of the month. So let's see how it goes. Let me know whether you prefer this method of book reviews or if you prefer to have one big video at the end of the month. And yeah, let's see. So the first book that I have finished in March was The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston. And this book really surprised me because I knew that it was an autobiography, kind of semi-autobiography, fictionalized autobiography of the author and the author's mother, and I also knew it was about perhaps the differences between growing up as a woman in China and growing up as a woman in the US. But what I was not prepared for was the style at all. It uses a lot of magical realism, which is wonderful, but I wasn't expecting it. And this book blurs the line between fiction and non-fiction really, really interestingly. And it's structured in a really interesting way and kind of jumps between her mother's life in China and growing up in China and then moving to the US, and also Maxine's life when she's growing up. It kind of follows her life up until kind of early adolescence. And what I found really interesting was her talking about her life and her childhood and growing up kind of different in a Chinese immigrant family, and knowing that you're different but not knowing whether the differences in your culture and your family life are because you're Chinese and this is what Chinese families do, or if it's because of the specific village in China that her parents came from, or if it's just a thing that her family does because she'd grown up and having never been to China and just hearing the Chinese that her parents spoke, which was a specific dialect from that specific part of China, and not being able to distinguish between just her parents' own family character traits and whether that's a thing that all Chinese families do. She also talks about her mother using a talk story, is what she says, when her mother tells her tales about her family history or tales about China. And I guess this form of narrative is what she is using with her own book and blurring the lines between fantasy and what really happened. And I think that was done really well. I wasn't prepared for it, so it took me a while to get into the book, but once I'd got a handle on how it was being written, I really, really enjoyed it. And it was so interesting. I mean, there's a lot in there that maybe went over my head because I don't know that much about Chinese culture, but that's what was interesting. It does kind of have a focus on women. It does definitely look at the differences between families having a big party when they have a baby boy and when they have a baby girl, being like, oh, we're going to sell her, we don't like her, and sort of the struggles she's had growing up as a daughter, and that not being a favoured option as opposed to a son. So that sort of commentary on women is interesting, but it's just an interesting book anyway, and that's a kind of another angle on it. And she does weave in Chinese legends about warrior women in ancient China, such as Fa Mulan, and talks about them going off and winning glory and defeating people in battle, but really after the battle is over, coming back and being a wife and mother, and that's still being the goal, and being a good daughter and daughter-in-law. So that side of it I really, really liked as well, and I think this is a really interesting book. However, just really heavy on the magical realism, so if that's not a style that you enjoy, then this book might throw you a little bit, but if you're down with that, then I think it's a really good read. Then I dived straight in to the 2 volumes of comics that I got in my latest book haul. The first of those being Saga, Volume 1, and yeah, wasn't blown away by this, to be honest. I'm not sure what the big fuss is about. This series follows the story of these 2 people on the front who are from opposing warring planets, and they fall in love and have a baby, and then the generals and people in the army from the different planets don't want this to happen, so they're sending people out to hunt them down and kill them. So they're running away from lots of different people that don't want their baby to be alive. But I felt like there were too many characters in this, too many different things going on. I thought it was quite messy and quite confused, and I felt like the relationship between these two was meant to be kind of sassy and funny, and but I just didn't think the dialogue was that funny. Like, they were kind of jokes and they were being all cutting with each other and like offbeat and cynical, and I just like, I don't think that's funny. I just didn't think it was that good. It was fine, but probably won't be continuing on with the series, and I'm really surprised to hear myself say that, because I don't think I've spoken to someone who didn't like Saga. I don't know what it is about it that just didn't grab me. But yeah, it was just, I just found it okay. So that was a bit of a shame. So I was thinking that perhaps I'm just not a comic book person. Maybe I'm drawn more towards a standard graphic novel type type thing. But then I straight away picked up Rat Queens Volume 2, and I really, really enjoyed this, and I really liked it. So perhaps I just don't like Saga. Rat Queens follows this kind of ragtag bunch of women who are all different. So there's like a dwarf and a witch, and I don't know what they all are. They all have different skills, and they're like a bunch of mercenaries that go and beat all the baddies in their kind of kingdom, I guess. But I think this is really, really funny, and I've laughed out loud several times reading this, and I really like the artwork. I really like the group of 4 women. I like their friendships, and I'm enjoying learning a bit more about their backstory. This is still just volume 2, so there's still quite a bit of scene setting happening, but I really enjoyed this, and I'm definitely going to be continuing on with this series, so I'm pleased that I picked this one up. I don't know if you have any recommendations for me, anything that's like more like Rat Queens and less like Saga. I don't know what it is that I just think this was much better written. And the most recent thing that I have finished is The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan. I think I was really in the mood for something fairy tale-y and fantasy and just a bit nice, and this absolutely delivered on that. It's set in a dystopian future world where the sea has kind of risen and flooded everywhere, so there's only a few spots of land left, and you have the people that are born on the land, and they take the land very, very seriously, and they think they're better than everyone else who has to live in boats, because there's just not enough space for everybody on the land. And it follows the story of North, who lives on a circus boat with her bear, and she has like a bear act in the circus, and Callanish, who lives on the land, and she is a gracekeeper, which is sort of like a funeral director, I suppose. Like when people in the sea die, they have to go to the graveyard and have their funeral there. I thought this was a really nice read. I think Kirsty Logan's writing was absolutely beautiful. There were some sentences where I was reading just thinking, oh, like I want to eat these words, they're so nice. And I really liked the world that she'd created. I thought it was really, really interesting. I did feel that there was a bit of a problem with pacing in this book. I think it builds towards its climax over such a long period of time and for so long that when you get to the end and it's kind of the summing up and the ending that you really want, it just happens so quickly that it left me wanting a little bit more. So I think I wish this was either the middle was a bit shorter or the end was a little bit longer, because I felt like there were some elements that I really wanted to be developed further. So that's a bit of a shame, but I think it might just be one of those first novel symptoms which you do get. And like I said, Kirsty Logan's writing is very, very nice. She has a couple of collections of short stories which I will definitely be checking out. This book was really hyped up for me, and I expected to be absolutely blown away by it, and I really, really enjoyed it. It was a really nice read. It just fell slightly short of the mark for me in terms of being, you know, like my favourite book ever, but I'm really pleased that I read it. I think you would enjoy this book if you like the kind of fairy tale elements that involve the sea. So there's lots of beautiful imagery like about mermaids and the sea and going on a voyage, or circuses and those sort of magical areas of fantasy. I think if that sort of stuff appeals to you, then you'll really like this book. It's kind of really original and really nice to see inside this world that she's created. So I'd be very, very excited to read both her short story collections and anything else that she's going to write next. So those are all the books that I've completed so far in March. I'm currently reading my very short introduction to myth, which I'm nearly finished, and yeah, that's really interesting. So that'll be featured in my next wrap up. And I'm also halfway through I Call Myself a Feminist, which is the Feminist Orchestra Book Club pick for March. So I'll talk about both of those more in my second half of my March wrap up. And as always, look forward to talking to you in the comments about any of these books if you've read them already. I always like to hear your thoughts, and I will see you in my next video. Bye! And he also sneakily sent me an advanced reader's copy of the next one in the series, which is Vinegar Girl by Anne Tyler, which is a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew.